Donald Trump and the whole Afrikaner movement. How are you processing it from your perspective as a South African?
And Afrikaner, I'm a weird one. I am seen by many white Afrikaners as a traitor, as a huge traitor to the cause. Because I joined the ANC and MK in 1988, I am seen as a sellout. The ANC is still the ANC, but the people in the ANC are not ANC people, I remember. The statement made by Mandela was as follows: if the ANC one day does to you, which the apartheid government did to you, then do to them what we did to the apartheid government. Quote, unquote. So, Wazemi, I'm just following the instruction of my last commander-in-chief. Day after day, we are scoring own goals against the biggest economic power in the world. Because I think we've got a dream and an idea that Russia and India and China is going to come bail us out. It's not going to happen. So that has now sparked a massive racial tension because the far-right groupings and the right wing, and call it the conservative Afrikaner side, is trying to protect itself because it feels that the ANC is now doing apartheid in reverse.
Thank you so much for joining Kwazemi here. This is going to be the first podcast I'll be having on this channel. I launched this channel as a West African to really start understanding South Africa, because I came to realize that we in West Africa really do not know South Africa. And I thought that this would be the beginning of a journey to really try to educate the wider West Africa, most of those, my audience in West Africa, but also at the same time, the wider Africa, on how we can really start to understand and conceptualize and really think about South Africa. And so joining me here is Neil De Beer. My first time also of meeting him, speaking to him for the first time. But I remember the first time I saw him on TV, he was with a guy from the DA party. I was starting to understand things, and the guy's name was Chris Pappas. And Neil De Beer said, if the ANC doesn't win by hook, they will win by crook, something like that. And so I was really like, whoa, this sounds like a really powerful politician. I'd really like to talk. So since then, I've been working my way through to try to really get to meet you, and I'm finally happy that we sort of like made this happen. So thank you so much for joining us, Neil. And first of all, I just really would like to ask just this question that, for my audience watching this video now, I really don't know. I really want to hear what you think. What do you expect that anyone watching this podcast would gain from listening to this interview? Probably just a few words from you.
Yeah, I'm quite honored to be the first one.
Yes,
that will now be historic, so no one can take that title away from me. No. But, what an honor, Wazemi, to be with you. I know that we've been working together to get this done. I've just been all over the show, but a privilege to be with you and share some of our thoughts. Yeah, I have a philosophy that they say you judge a book by the cover. But I have an addition to that, which will be my opening statement as an African, is that we judge the book by the color. So the world has become a universal platform where we have currently battles on religious divide. As you know, the Muslim community and the other communities that want to have more Christian foundation have now found a platform called Gaza to start a world separation, tragically, on religion again. The battle of racism, the history of colonialism, slavery, enveloped over many centuries, has also remained that we now on color also judged and separated. So there's a fundamental beginning that says that if you don't know who I am, I would look to you as a true white European colonist. Yet you don't know that I was a member of Umkhonto Wesizwe and joined the struggle, the armed struggle, with Mandela to bring freedom to the country. So that's the first lesson we should learn, is that not every book has a specific cover. So I'm an African. I was born on the continent of Africa. I am not European. My father's forefathers might be. I have no synergy with Europe. I'm an Afrikaner. And that blood, that soil, that sun, that laughter, that culture is in me. That's why I made a fundamental statement the one day to say when Thabo Mbeki did the I am an African speech, I was present. And I got inspired again to understand that firstly, we are all human beings. Secondly, we have separate cultures. And thirdly, we are people that have different ideologies, but we share one thing in Africa, Kwazemi, and that's Africa. And if you're not born in Africa, I'm not saying that if you come and visit or come and stay, there's a difference. We should be proud to be Africans. But our biggest problem, and I'll conclude with this opening statement, is that for a very long while, we just cannot unite as one huge continent, 1.23 billion people, that matches India, that matches China and America, and we cannot unify because of the lack of leadership on this continent. And that's what I'm fighting every day, to say that we are better united as 55 countries, to stand together as an economic bloc. And in actual fact, very few people know that for 2 years, I was the first Secretary General of the Organization for African Business Development that put the plan together to unite Africa as an economic bloc, but it dismally failed. It's still failing because of the US dollar, the euro, in bags going to our leadership. Not all of them, but corruption is the killer of our future generation.
Wow. Wow, that's such a powerful opening statement. Thank you so much. I remember, especially when you speak about that you're African. I think during my PhD studies, I remember this video where we were deliberating, because I used to teach lectures on social exclusion, and we had pulled in racism and all of that. So I remember particularly this day I saw a video of you saying that you are African and that you don't consider yourself white. And in fact, it became a topic for me in my study group on race, racism, anti-racism, and the problem of, how to problematize the African, just like as you rightly said. And, when I think about the name De Beer, all right, I was also in a conference, I think it was last year, and there was this lady, I think she was from Tanzania, and she mentioned about how when the name De Beers comes to her, she feels really strange and awkward, because I think she speaks about the history of De Beers, I think in Zimbabwe and in that region of the South anyway. But I'm really curious to know, and also to probably a West African someday, or an Atlantic Black someday really watching this video. I'm curious to know what stories you might want to share on how you ended up in South Africa, parents, family, lineage, any remarkable stories you wish to let us understand, especially regarding your African roots, because really what you and the likes of you are doing, you are really problematizing the concept of African and helping us to really think about how to think of what it is an African is. So I don't know if you can share some thoughts.
I want to drop a bombshell. Clarify this De Beers myth. And your audience, and you are going to be shocked. Again, it is naivety. It is the lack of research substance. and the lack of knowledge of history that could be seen as one of the biggest failures of humanity. Behind me are two pictures, two icons in my life, and they're mine. They're not yours. So they're mine. Not everything of Mandela and everything of Winston Churchill is palatable to me. It's acceptable to me. It's like when you get the tossed salad and there's olives and you don't eat olives. You don't throw away the salad. You just pick up the olives. So I chose great people in the world that are mentors in research to me. So Golda Meir, Gandhi, Churchill, Margaret Thatcher, Nelson Mandela, Howard Tambo. These are the people, JFK, wisdom, people that Barack Obama, these people did speeches, and Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. These are the people I've based my theory of the transition of humanity on. And these are some of the greatest people that lived as humans. The myth about De Beers is an absolute comic relief when you find out the truth. So, as you all know, there's a big hole, Kwazemi, in our country's geography called the Kimberley Hole, Kimberley Gat. And that is probably one of the biggest diamond finds that was ever done in the past 2 centuries in South Africa. So the story goes, a gentleman called Cecil John Rhodes, who was a pioneer in the British Empire and had a huge link with America in the late 1800s, came to this little place called Kimberley, and that's where the word kimberlite comes from, which now is an international terminology, that if you find a kimberlite pipe, it's a diamond pipe, but they called it kimberlite, Kimberley. So dominating was this company of Cecil John Rhodes. And Kwazemi, here's the story. The person that owned the farm where this diamond find was discovered was a man called Johannes de Beer. He owned the farm. Cecil John Rhodes then came and had a then established company called Anglo American. The word Anglo is British and America is America. He formulated a company called Anglo American in the late 1890s. And that diamond find on Johannes de Beer's farm was then bought, I think for, if I go to the museum again, was bought for £298 in 1896. And then what happened was Anglo-American decided to call and name their international diamond company De Beers, to the naming of the guy who owned the original largest diamond field in the continent. So, no, De Beer is not rich, De Beer isn't wealthy, and De Beer has bloody nothing to do with diamonds. It was the farmer who sold it. So the fallacy of De Beers, the name, is absolutely ignorant to the fact of the history. And although a lot of people beg me for money and love me to parties, when they find out that we are not the actual people, then my invites to braais and barbecues kind of dry up. So I just wanted to clear that very clear. De Beers has nothing to do with diamonds. It was Cecil John Rhodes and a company which now was bought over by the Oppenheimers, and they ran it. And I can tell you, I wish I was family of a wealthy family. So no, De Beers is not a truthful legacy. It is a fact of history that has been misconstrued. So when you introduce yourself as Neil De Beer, people go, oh, the De Beer family, and then you tell them, please go bloody Google and do some effort. So secondly, the understanding is, where do we come from, Kwazemi? Where do we originate from? if we believe in the myths of biblical history, which I am a Christian, you can believe in evolution on that matter. If you are a person that subscribes to the science and the methodology of evolution on that way, you have a different theory. But what we do agree is that Africa was the actual cradle of humanity, and that the continent was far in existence before anybody from other continents came to colonize. That is history. And it is a history that will never leave us. But, Kwazemi, you've got to ask a question, which is an intellectual question. How long? Mm-hmm. Well, if you're biblical, then you will use the biblical phrase that the sins of your fathers will be paid up by your sons. Which, if you then debate that intellectually, that's not right. That should not perpetuate until death becomes of humanity. There must come a time where we evolve, where we can use the internet, where we can use the platform you and I are. You are in the UK, I'm in South Africa. This is the wonder of technology. People like you that have gone into the academia, into the principles of educating people, are now facing new challenges, but new advantages like AI. And that will become the new war and battle of the worlds. Is technology taking over? I don't know, Kwazemi, but I think, not knowing you, but seeing you, you're a person, I think, that does the personal lecturing. I think you like being in a class, speaking to real people. This is a way of economic decision, but personal education, passion can never be replaced by a machine. And therefore, Neil de Beer, in 1968, was born in a small town called Stellenbosch, in the Republic of South Africa, on the continent of South Africa. I have no interest in my lineage. I like history, but I don't live it. So I know I was born here. If I was born in Ghana, or I was born in Lagos, or I was born in Maputo, it's still Africa. My parents came from Europe, but it has bloody nothing to do with me. I'm an African. I love Africa. I love the continent. I am the most, as you now know, unracial human being that you can fight. In fact, it disgusts me when you start talking about the pigmentation of the color of your skin. We should be looking at the goodness of your soul. And one day when you can judge people on the humanity of their soul and kindness, that day you will forget white and black.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's a really, really strong, really intense thoughts there. Really, raise a lot of thoughts in my mind. I remember the likes of Kwame Nkrumah would say in his time that he's not African because he was born in Africa, and he's African because Africa was born in him. And so,
Amen.
This
Absolutely.
would.
And you know what, Kwazemi, if I had to walk today into you in a street, I don't know how to explain that, but I would immediately know you're my brother. You're an African. And when we start talking, you would say, but I was born in Nigeria and I'm an African. There are just certain things you and I can share, which the people in the UK will never understand, which the people in America, and this qualification of African American is horrendous. You're American. You're not African American. I'm not European African. I'm African, dude. I have a passport. I have a birth certificate. You and I can talk about certain things that they cannot. And what are they? The free flow of the sun, the magnitude of geography, the beauty of the forest, the fact that we can make an open fire with wood and sing, and culturally agree that when we really go back to the cradle, we are honored to be of a tribe called Africa. The only thing that divides us is the politicians. The only thing that divides us is money. We never had money, Kwazim. We used to trade buck for goat, goat for sheep, sheep for milk. Milk, we used to actually then trade for vegetables. And we used to live all of that. Cassava, we understand that. That's what differentiates us. And it's a pity today that even in my country, the racial flare between black and white has again become relevant after 30 years because of politics. And we are battling a massive fight at this moment with the United States. And we will probably speak about that because it has a massive impact, probably on Africa, because of the interest of America. So I believe that we are a unique human. And although we come from various entries, because you are a white person, you cannot carry the legacy of 300, 400 years. There must come a time where we sit down and say, the past must be learned. It must never be forgotten. But Kwazemi, we can't live in the past. We have a future, man. We have a big future.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. That's really, and although I this is actually serendipity now, but I just thought to really, now that you're trying to get into the United States and all that, I think I might just want to lean into that to really understand your framing of what's Donald Trump and the whole Africana movement and the whole thing in South Africa. How are you processing it from your perspective as, as a South African, someone who is
an Afrikaner?
Yes, and as an African,
I'm a weird one. I am seen by many white Afrikaners as a traitor, as a huge traitor to the cause, because I joined the ANC and MK in 1988. I am seen as a sellout. I always say, if you call me that, then you obviously are a racist. So that argument will never end. I did not join Nelson Mandela, the ANC and MK, because I decided to turn on my own. I will never turn on my own, but we didn't have a choice. We knew in 1994, Nelson Mandela would become president. We knew the ANC could not be stifled anymore and that the world cut us off. I joined it because of a factual understanding. What is humanity? I've always been a humanist. I got that from my grandmother. So I believe that a white guy that gets up and fights for black liberty will never be forgotten by his own and forgiven. But this white guy, like Joe Slovo, like Ronnie Caswells, like Ruth First, got up and said, it's not about black and white. It's about dignity and humanity. We fought for that. And now we're back again because the country is divided here, Kwazemi. I would say the continent is divided. We have a battle between the East and the West. China, Russia, India, the BRICS grouping has a massive influence on this continent, even in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Ivory Coast. They are battling, funny enough, about our food. It's like we are sitting around the campfire. There's BRICS and the West, and you and I are sitting there, and they're talking in front of us about taking our stuff. And we are looking at each other and going, oh, they're talking about our gold, eh? They're talking about our oil, aren't they? And we say nothing. We just sit there and we let this debate go on and let China and the rest of the continent battle it out on our soil. And that's why I'll go back to say that South Africa sits in a very precarious position. We are a founder of BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa. BRICS has now increased threefold, including now Middle East countries as a partner. We are looking at trying to partner up with their currency and their economic support. But that brought direct conflict with America. Now, Kwazemi, we can say what we want, but the dollar rules. It is the global currency. And therefore, even China owns more dollars than the US do. So they can't change to the one. They have too many dollars. So when America decides to shut that tap, we will suffer the consequence. But this government, this ANC, the ANC, is leading the foreign dictated policy, and it is contrary on every level to the United States, to Donald Trump, because he only cares about America. He doesn't care about foreign policy. But this thing is funny, not in a comic way, but weird. Why is he picking on us? Why South Africa? Well, he says that we are friends with Iran, mortal enemy of America. He says that we recognize Hezbollah and Hamas, and that we support their terrorism, as what he calls it. We support Hamas and Palestine. We took Israel, this little country in the world, took Israel to the International Courts of Justice for genocide. So day after day, we are scoring own goals against the biggest economic power in the world. Because I think we've got a dream and an idea that Russia and India and China is going to come bail us out. It's not going to happen, Kwazim. So that has now sparked a massive racial tension, because the far-right groupings and the right wing, and call it the conservative Afrikaner side, is trying to protect itself, because it feels that the ANC is now doing apartheid in reverse, which was never, I can tell you that, the ideology of Nelson Mandela. Never. Nelson Mandela wanted reconciliation, and he wanted a rainbow nation. That rainbow is gone. It's now black and white again. And that is our problem, is this American issue has hugely divided our country again into race. And it's sad, but this voice you are hearing now, I am standing up in this country and I'm talking the truth to say, stop this now. 30 years of reconciliation is being destroyed in 1 year. And Kwazemi, you're an African, but you are passionate about this continent. South Africa cannot burn again because of international hyenas stripping us apart.
Wow, thank you. That was really timely assessment of the situation. But anyway, I'm very curious about your decision to get into politics in South Africa. So I know you've spoken about how you joined the Nkonto Wesizwe party and all that. And really, I can tell you, most of us in South Africa, except those who have really studied the ANC and all that, really do not even understand the whole thing with the Nkonto Wesizwe, the details of the ANC and all that time. So I spoke to, while planning to meet you, I spoke to one of your, the team, and they spoke about that I could get some articles on you and books and all that. And I placed an order for a book, this book called Undercover with Mandela Spies. And it's yet to arrive though, but I'm expecting it. I also found...
Yeah, I can sign it one day.
Yes, that would be really, really nice.
Preferably on African soil, because
exactly. Yes, I'll definitely. I'll definitely find a way to get there and have you sign it. But I also read this really interesting abstract from the Mail and the Guardian, all right? So it was written by this guy, Bradley Stein. And in the article, it felt like a movie going through everything Stein mentioned and, mentioning you and some of the actions that was going on with this whole thing around the whole concept of undercover with Mandela Spy. So can you please help us understand or expand a little bit on the whole concept of Mandela Spies? Why was this necessary at the time, or was it necessary? And any remarkable stories you can share as regards that whole anti-colonial movement in West, East, Central Africa, 1960s. I don't know if you know about the Biafra War, Igbo, ethnically Igbo, the Patrice Lumumba in the Congo, Nkrumah's coup in 1966. Anything, I think it would be really helpful for like a West African listening to you now and understanding all this.
Yeah, I think to set the tone, West Africa is the cracker in the crack. It's the color in the dress. You know, West Africans have just an absolute way,
Mm.
culturally, to be the significance of, I would say, art,
Mm.
fundamental culture of Africa. And it is one of the most vibrant areas within the North, South, East, and West African continent. And, you know, that is interesting, where we say to each other that there were no boundaries, there were no borders, Kwazemi, 400-500 years ago on the continent.
Mm.
When Britain, countries like the Netherlands, the Dutch companies, the UK, the Portuguese, the Belgians, found their way to the continent, you could clearly see that there was an influence to change us. In other words, for the first time, they used the missionaries and used religion to infiltrate the continent bit by bit under the guise of bringing freedom and Christianity, God's word. Many people know that was not the real fact, and that genocides were actually committed in the name of God and Christianity. But as that influences came, the West brought their technology to the African continent, we started to change as human beings. We started to alter our culture to adapt to the West. And slowly but surely, we started to lose the battle of self-identity. Because the Christian culture, the modern culture, the Western culture overtook us, sadly, in many ways. And then it became the battle of slavery. It became the battle of resources. And the plundering started. And that is history. The African National Congress was founded in 1912. It was not called the ANC. It was then a united black consciousness movement that unified the then centralized black African leadership for the freedom of South Africa. That was done 2 years after the first Republic of South Africa was declared in 1910. And that was the first ever coalition, Kwazemi, in South Africa. And it was between the Boere and the English, which ended the Anglo-Boer War. Paul Kruger became relevant, and we had a republic. And here's the thing, not a single black man was invited to those talks. So you had the majority of the population in 1910 sitting here and being ruled by two previous enemies, the United Kingdom and the Boere, the Dutch. And that was unacceptable because, again, the minority was going to rule the majority. And that's why in 1912, in Mangaung, aka Bloemfontein, the first meeting of that black conscience movement started. They were never revolutionary military orientated. They wanted to negotiate a peaceful settlement with the inclusion of the majority non-white population who owned this country. Now, can you imagine you are being excluded and you are being told that this is how it works? So boundaries were drawn, provinces were created, and since 1912, the ANC then continued to do peaceful negotiations and chats. Not sure of the exact year, but in the late 70s and late 60s, a lawyer called Nelson Mandela started to be a leader in the ANC. And funny enough, when the apartheid system really started to kick back, the occasion of 1976 of the Sharpeville conflict, the shooting of the kids, the uprising in the country started to become militant. And it is then the fact that Nelson Mandela went to the executive of the ANC and said that he is going to start a military wing called Umkhonto we Sizwe, which means the tip of the spear. He went to Algeria and got his first military training in Algeria. They then established MK against the will of O.R. Tambo, Walter Sisulu, and Govan Mbeki. They did not want a military onslaught. But it became real. The apartheid state started with huge suppression under state security. People were being jailed and sent to Robben Island. So the military struggle started as the MK division, as the military wing of the ANC. Just like the IRA, you had the political group called Sinn Féin, and the IRA was their military. The MPLA, FAPLA, UNITA, SWAPO, they all had a political party, but they had a military division to fight at that stage the West and the Western ideology. So it was kind of under pressure that the ANC became a guerrilla fighting military division. People going into exile, camps in Angola, camps in Zim, and Swaziland, Lesotho, and Mozambique. And that then became the system of trying to fight the apartheid system. I'm not a spy. That's a movie terminology. I am a educated, highly trained intelligence officer. You went to school for that. You get taught how to do intelligence, and also, more than that, more importantly at times, counterintelligence. So we were schooled and trained in that. The best way to classify a spy, it is a highly educated, intelligent human being that can distract vital information at times from another person without that person knowing. That's the translation of a spy. So I joined in 1988 for various reasons. It is described in that book. A small unit that was linked to senior members of the ANC intelligence network or spy, one of them called Jeremy Vieri, and the other one on the book cover, Andre Lincoln, which were our leaders and our icons. And that story that is in that book is the story not of mine, but of Brad Stein, who had his own walk, starting off with a mass murder, where he was a 16-year-old boy in Stradum Square in Pretoria, where a man with the name of Barend Stadom, commonly known as the Wit Wolf, shot and killed numerous people of black color. And my friend Brad Stein was in that square that day. So that picture of the white, blonde young boy sitting on the ground in that square with a bleeding and dying so-called black man on his lap is Brad Stein.
Oh, wow.
So he wrote that book, but unfortunately I occupied 3/4 of his life and I am in that book. And it's an interesting book. Yeah, there's a bit of fascinate and I think addiction like any author does. And it was not all at Hollywood stricken. There were serious times of peril and death and danger. But that is the story. And the necessity for the ANC to build up an intelligence division was critical, because we needed to know and understand what the enemy was doing. It's called KYE, know your enemy. And at that stage, Kwazemi, I'm white. I was in the military of the apartheid era. So who better than to infiltrate the then right-wing and the then apartheid system than two young white guys who actually gave a damn about freedom, and we put our lives at risk to do so. So it then grew. The intelligence agencies got stronger. The network of MK became bigger. But I'll tell you one thing, without the help of the international world, the sanctions that were put against our country,
Mm-hmm.
I think the Boere would still be fighting today. They've got tenacity. They don't give up.
Yeah.
So my opinion, right or wrong, is that the apartheid government would still be in power today if they had the money.
Mm.
So they capitulated, not because they surrendered military-wise. They ran out of money because no one wanted to fund us anymore. And the rest is history. We released Mandela. But I'll end this piece of the segment to tell you something interesting, which no one wants to talk about and which many forget. In 1991, the then President F.W. de Klerk, who is now deceased, boldly took a decision to hold a national referendum on the basis of letting Mandela go, unbanning the ANC, and going to peace talks. And the fun fact here is that it was only white people, Kwazemi, that were allowed to vote in that referendum. The result of that referendum was 68.2% said, let's move on and let Mandela go. White people took that decision, and that is history. We can write that in our books. But the catalyst to freedom started with Mandela. But before him, little people know, with P.W. Botha. So it wasn't de Klerk that met Mandela first. It was the old crocodile, P.W. Botha. But there was a problem in his negotiation. It stands now in record that he would only release Mandela on the condition that he commanded MK to lay down their weapons, and Mandela refused, so they locked him up again. Only with Evia replacing Pevia after he had a stroke did they drop those conditions, and Codesa followed. So the military wing, the intelligence divisions, with support of international people like Cuba, like Russia, like China, was vital to us. And that's where I think we are, where we are, without bloodshed. No shots were fired in 94. We had probably one of the most peaceful transitions on the African continent and in the world. And that's what we're fighting for, Wazim. We are fighting to remain the memory of people like Chris Hani, people that died in our midst, so that today you and I freely can talk about our opinions in a democracy.
Thank you. That's very rich, really rich thoughts there. Okay, so I think my next question, one of the things that still also gets me really interested to understand some of the things about South Africa, is about now I'm speaking about how that my understanding as a West African would be that the ANC was fighting for the liberation of Black Africa, especially from apartheid right in South Africa. But if you can help us get into the headspace of the time, this was now, if I can say, affiliation with many Africans at this time, which was a Black-dominated, Black-led party in pursuit of Black liberation. I know you've spoken about how you might have been seen as a sellout within the white Afrikaner maybe community at the time, but how did you fit into the wider group? This is really important for many a Black consciousness movement people trying to really understand and negotiate. A person like Neil de Beer fighting within a Black consciousness movement in Africa, fighting for Black liberation. What was the relationship between you and other members of the movement? Did you face any kind of exclusion, rejection? Can you paint a picture for us of that period? Any remarkable stories, events? what kind of connection with other freedom fighters? Probably Frelimo. There were the guys like Amilcar Cabral. Those of us academics, we read a lot about Amilcar Cabral, West Africa. Did you have any kind of personal connection to those stories you can share with us? Thank you.
They asked Morgan Freeman, well-known actor and black activist. They asked him a question one day on a TV show. And they said, Morgan, how do we stop racism between black and white? And he didn't take a breath. He just said the following: stop calling them that.
And he still says that today, really.
Kwazemi, I didn't know you're black. Really? You're black? No, you're not. You're a human. It's a choice. I can see a black man in front of me, or I can see a friend. I can see a human. I can see a professional. I can see an educator. I prefer to see that. I find it, so uneducated, unrealistic, naive to still say that's a black man and that's a white man. I shudder at that. Maybe I'm one in a million. That makes me special because I do not see color. I don't understand it because I fought not to. So that's point one. Secondly, South Africa is not an island. You know, sometimes we as South Africans deem to be the end and be all of the continent. For a very long time, because of the past, the technology, the westernization, the income, the influence, the oppression and destruction, made South Africa, obviously, infrastructurally, a leader on the continent. Because all the focus of, call it European Western money, came to us. It didn't go to Nigeria. It didn't go to Mozambique. It came to South Africa. There's a very great, I call her great, politician in this country called Helen Zille.
I know.
AKA the Iron Lady. Like her or don't, she comes out of the black consciousness movement. She was a journalist, but she wasn't a journalist that conformed to the apartheid era. Steve Biko, she's the one that exposed it. So there's one thing you can't say about Helen, like you can't say about me. I'm not a racist. It can't be. I suffered my life for that. But Helen Zille is seen now as a person that is in the Democratic Alliance, which they all say is a white party, which is rubbish. It can't be a white party, Kwazemi, if it is the second largest political party in the country. There's only 3 million whites in this country. So it is a party that's multiracial. Yeah, the majority are white people that lead it, but that is how the system works. Helen Zille famously tweeted for the twats on Twitter one day, a couple of years ago. And she said that not everything in the apartheid era or the colonial era was bad. Yo. Kwazemi, did she get nailed? Being a racist, always being an undercover right-winger, and they totally stripped her apart. They didn't read the message. She said that the infrastructure, Eskom at that stage, SAA, Denel, were far advanced economically than any other African country because of the apartheid era. But she wasn't talking about the law apartheid. She was trying to say that we received huge infrastructural boosts and that we mustn't destroy that. But then she was automatically said she's a racist. It's times like that that unfortunately you have to watch what you say, the context that you say it. But now we are surrounded by countries who are fighting for their life. So previously, Mozambique supported us. In actual fact, Samora Machel, his wife, after he died in a still to be understood plane crash, Graça Machel married Madiba. And that gave an interlinking family between the relationship of Mozambique and South Africa. But their forces helped us. Zimbabwe, ZANU, had their own military struggle. And in 1979, Robert Mugabe became the first of many presidents that got independence. Zim is fighting for its economic life at the moment, as you know. In Angola, it's also not going prosperous because it was ruled by, a family, the Dos Santos family, for years. And then Namibia, SWAPO, is declining. They just scraped through. One wonders who can crook. So the immediate neighbors that were previously our supporters in the struggle, which housed Russia, which housed Cuba, are now in peril themselves. And why do I say so? Your listeners must now understand that the era of liberation political organizations has come to an end. So your Sam Nyomas, your Machels, your Dos Santos, your Mugabes are busy fading out. The Mandela magic in our country is also fading, and the ANC is helping to kill it. The new generation of, I don't know what you call them, X or I don't know, next gen AI. Nelson Mandela was an old man that was some or other time a liberator, and he was stuck on an island. They don't know him. So therefore, the ANC's biggest fall down, they couldn't in 30 years, Kwazemi, move from a liberation organization to a government. And all those countries I've mentioned, Sudan, Juba, Khartoum, CAR, DRC Congo, they are all failing because they are ex-liberation, ex-military. I mean, the Kabila family wanted to be His Majesty. They own it. They don't see themselves as democratically elected people. And can you imagine going from 66.2% of the vote in 94 to 40% last year?
That was a really huge one.
In my lifetime. I never thought so. And currently, they are saying on an unofficial political poll I saw this morning that the voter confidence in the ANC is now at 27%. So you can see, Kwazemi, the possibility that in 2029, there will be no more ANC. There will be factions left of it, but that will be struck by hyenas on a carcass. And that doesn't bode well for our future with MK Party now rising as the third largest party, but they are totally revolutionary. They are anti, and we can touch on that future.
Yes. Wow, that's really a lot of scenarios building up in my head when I try to really listen to you. And but anyway, I'll just quickly try to get into the next question I have for you. I remember that you came on the scene at some point, I mean, like you've been on the scene in South Africa, but when I started studying South Africa, I saw you firstly on the Biz News, and platforms like State of the Nation with Mike Sham, yes, that's his name. And also at the fallout of the Moonshot Pact. That's when I slowly started to understand how you see and process South Africa. And I've also heard your fierce, takes on the ANC, the EFF, and the MK. In fact, there's one of your videos on the EFF that went viral on my TikTok, and that was when I think you were speaking about, the hateful speeches of I think it was Malema or the EFF or something like that. It went really viral, and this has actually been one of the reasons why I thought we really need to start talking about these things and what really are we thinking about when we think about the EFF, the MK party, and all of that. So first, what's your opinion on the fallout, or where, in your opinion, did the fallout with the ANC begin? I mean, like, in terms of, if I try to understand the National Democratic Revolution, I heard that from Thabo Mbeki. I started studying that almost 2 years ago. The radical economic transformation, I've heard you speak about that also on Biz News. And I also would suggest that, was this the objective, really, of the ANC when you joined the Mkonto Wesizwe, as you've helped us understand, at 1994-ish, that period? Or did this whole thing evolve over time after Thabo Mbeki? This whole thing with the National Democratic Revolution, radical economic transformation, what was this when you were with the ANC? How did you process it at the time and today?
I think what is very important to know is that people don't always recognize that the ANC does not stand alone. I think few people know that it's actually a tripartite coalition. Since the inception of the ANC, it has as alliance partners the South African Communist Party, headed up by Blaise Nzimande, and COSATU, which is the biggest trade union in the country. This is critical to understand, because if you understand that the ANC is partnered with the SA Communist Party and the trade union, that's the fundamental beginning that you need to start with. The ANC is not a democratic, capitalistic, free market society entity in its policies. It adopted it because it found it here. And because of the major Western capitulation of absolute pressure on the world to free Mandela. But there were demands made. I have a famous interview where I say the ANC got democracy and power by surprise. We didn't know we were going to get it. And when the national party in this country decided, Kwazemi, to give up and to let go, they did it in such a rapid turbo speed. No one was ready. They were ready.
Wow.
The National Party was ready. They already had 160 files and contracts and agreements spearheaded by Rolf Meyer as the negotiator and Cyril as our negotiator. And we weren't ready. We used to laugh. They came in with those big trolleys of files and we brought the water, because what the hell did we have? We came out of the bush. We came out of exile. We came out of hiding. So we didn't have access to all of this. But you were facing at CODESA in Boksburg, in those negotiations, a formidable enemy, an enemy that ruled this country for 50, 60 years, that had the power of knowledge. They were the government. What did we know? Well, we knew how to fight them. We knew how to terrorize them and how to put pressure internationally. We did not have a government. So we had to quickly choose people to take that position. Mandela had to lead from the front. And I'm saying that at that CODESA, that the ANC walked out with less than what they wanted. And that's clear. Because we now sit with issues that should have been debated in 1992. We are now suffering that consequence. The consequence of land reform, the consequence of the current racial divide, the consequence of retribution, the consequence of justice. We are now picking it 30 years later, and it's like a steam cooker under pressure. And in the past 30 years, there were little occasions where you could hear it go tss, where it nearly went out, the Durban riots, the looting. That is the pressure of, in my opinion, weak decisions done in the negotiation. The National Party walked out and suffered what? No one was locked up. The ministers got pension. They actually went into the first and second coalition because we had a coalition government in 94. People forget it. President was Mandela. The vice president was Thabo Mbeki, and the deputy vice president was F.W. de Klerk. And they got a Nobel Peace Prize. No. Think about it, my brother. That's crazy. The apartheid government that oppressed you for 50, 60 years since Verwoerd is now in cabinet with you. Gets paid, gets driven. So that's why people say this was a massive miracle that we could get this done. That at the end of the day, thank God the Almighty, we have never gone to civil war, civil disobedience on a national scale. We've handled it. And because we are a unique people, Neil de Beer, I always laugh when someone says to you, but you were in MK. Oh, that was for 4 years. What did I do after 94? It seems people don't understand that I have had a life for the past 30 years. And no, I was not in the ANC employ. No, I was not in government employ. I went to business. I started the first ever rugby university in the world. I owned a company called Rhino Rugby. I was the member and part of that management team of the under-21 Springbok rugby team that won a World Cup in 2005 in Argentina. I was one of the personal founders of the IFA, which was an international investment fund for infrastructure in Africa for 6 years, based in Barcelona. I've been busy, not with politics, but with the economy, which I'm good at. But 4 years ago, I came back to this country. I had a lot of staff in our employ, and I was shutting down. I was leaving because of what was already happening with the looting, the Zondo Commission, the strife in this country. I saw that the ANC is still the ANC, but the people in the ANC are not ANC people, I remember. So I was leaving, Kwazemi. I was emigrating, shutting down my offices, terminating employment, withdrawing out of South Africa. And then a friend called me, a mentor, and he said, there's a rumor you're leaving. And I said, yes. And he said, please don't go. You are one of the last people that can bring together black and white, because you were on both sides. You understand both sides. We need that right now. I then took that, I don't know, Kwazemi, crazy mad decision to enter politics. And that's 4 years ago. I started the United Independent Movement, in actual fact, not as a political party, but as a movement of change. And then we decided to enter myself as an independent candidate. The law then stopped us from competing, and I had to start the party. And that was my entry to politics, and my founding statement to the media that day was that the memory of Nelson Mandela, the struggle that we came through, and the statement made by Mandela was as follows. If the ANC one day does to you, which the apartheid government did to you, then do to them what we did to the apartheid government. Quote, unquote.
Wow.
So, Kwazemi, I'm just following the instruction of my last commander-in-chief. I'm now doing to them which they did to others on the same way.
Wow. That's really, wow, that's really powerful. I doubt, I really don't know, I'm not sure a lot of, most of us in West Africa know all of this. Actually, Mandela for us really stands as an icon, but we're really not delved deeply into all of this you're trying to really break down for us, and I really appreciate you. So now I want us just a little bit deeper, in the next few questions. So I know I've been studying, the beginning of my own political research and all that, black consciousness and all that began with the EFF, especially, the whole thing with white monopoly capital. Those words were so popular 3-4 years ago, and the black African Americans, like you actually argue, the blacks and the Atlantic, this was a really popular kind of like notion coming from South Africa. And for me, the EFF was kind of like, wow, who are these guys? And I started studying slowly. And now that's actually one of the motivations that got me to create this channel. But getting now deeper into South Africa's politics, I see that the story it's with the EFF is really, really different. So to me, the EFF almost feels like an offshoot of the ANC. I think a lot of commentators speak about that a lot. Very popular in West, East, Central Africa, the Caribbeans, the islands. As a South African politician, and really, I just really got to know that, you just got into politics 4 years, but you've done a lot. You've achieved, the UIM has achieved so much unbelievably within 4 years. So as a South African politician with this insider knowledge of the EFF's positionality in South Africa, not outside now with the popularity, what impact do you think that the EFF could have on the future of Africa, especially with this whole movement with One Africa, Borderless Africa, which they also, have as a mantra, but having a different kind of understanding and positionality in South Africa's politics? What impact do you really think they have?
Look, Julius Malema was the president of the Youth League of the ANC while I was in the ANC. And he had a major following. At that stage, the Youth League has always dominated and was the cornerstone of the ANC. There are 3 rocks that carried the ANC in the past. It's the Youth League, the Women's League, and MK. Those were the foundations of the ANC. They have all disappeared. They have all fallen flat, which means that the critical mass that kept the ANC relevant has fallen apart. The last real dynamic leader of the youth in this country was Julius Malema. And when he got expelled out of the ANC, it was like he took the Youth League away. Wow. And they became a party. Him, Floyd Savambo, and Seto, who have all now left and joined MK, which in my opinion is the new EFF. The EFF have lost huge percentages in votes. They were a building dominating entity, and now they've regressed in the last election to not even 9%. The relevance of Julius has also started to water down because the key word, Kwazemi, in EFF is economic. Okay? They are not the revolutionary or the black freedom fighter. No, they're the EFF. So they found their manifesto based on economic freedom for the black majority. The economy doesn't work that way. Economies are no longer scaled to country. They scaled to continent and global. And like it or not, which many times we don't like, it's dominated by white minority capital. It's a fact. I mean, I did a speech about that, a massive speech that went viral at an ANC conference. And I said that white minority capital exists. I don't even know why we're debating it. Because the economies of scale of a century was Western. They were the people dominating with force sometimes the trade. So, Kwazemi, we mustn't be surprised that there is a fight back and that traction by the EFF was gotten by promises made that they would change the economy, that they would get rid of white minority capital, that they would get rid of race-dominated funding principles, that the JSE will be transformed, etc., etc. And that never happened. So the rhetoric of a person like Julius has faded. And the Red Revolution has come to nothing. And here's the reason why. The EFF have never been able to govern. So keep that in mind. In the past 5, 18 years, the EFF has never won governance of a municipality.
Wow.
That's weird. I mean, you've got this massive wave of red berets, but you never won a governmental institution in this country. You've been able to do coalitions, you've been able to have seats in parliament, and now you lost that status as the third largest party to MK.
Wow.
So the question is, where's Julius going? Because Julius Malema is the EFF. Like I am the UIM, like at this current moment, Jay-Z is MK. We can't deny that. So where's the individual going? Now there's big rumor he's either going to join the GNU, he's going to slot in there, he's going to support the ANC in the GNU, but they will have to tolerate the DA and the PA and the Freedom Front and IFP, etc., which will then escalate Julius's personality for the first time to be in government, i.e. a deputy minister or a minister. And then the test will come. How do they add to governance? Because the economic freedom fighters are based on certain, they call it pillars. But those pillars are not going to be put into an economic capitalistic society, Kwazim. And again, like it or not, we are ruled by the dollar. So although we fight for the increase of black capacity in business, one of the biggest failures in this country is black economic empowerment. BEE. Now, like many things on earth, the intention was good, the outcome was bad. Because BEE only empowered a very small selection of people in this country that are black. The ANC realized that. You know, the Patrice Mutsepes, the Cyril Ramaphosa's, the Tokyo Sukwales, they started becoming billionaires. But the masses did not get the money.
Yeah.
So they changed the law. They added a B.
Broad-based.
You know, it's like you are just moving the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. So I'm a proponent of cancelling BEE and replacing it with NEE, which is National Economic Empowerment. You see, I joined the ANC not to have a color differentiation. It's 30 years later. How far must we go? This country does not need racial division. It needs economic unification. Because people must eat, Kwazemi, and we are not being able to keep that up.
Wow.
So Neil de Beer didn't just pop out. I've been understanding governments. I've not been in government, but I was part of it. And now I'm a politician, and I am delivering my history and my knowledge of the history of this country, but based on the model of the Mandela Principle. And I will not stop, even if it means that I am, as I am, under threat of death, exclusion, or incarceration. The idea of a free South Africa, a multiracial South Africa, is on our slogan of our national emblem. And it is Khoisan. Says Ki Karateka. Khoisan is the oldest language in our country.
Yeah.
Mandela was so wise not to choose one of the top languages because he knew it would be a divide. So he used Khoisan. And what does Tikarateka mean? Well, it means unity in diversity.
Brilliant.
Eenheid in diversiteit. How beautiful. How stunning. We are just not getting to measure that slogan at the moment.
Wow, brilliant, brilliant. And I think I would agree with you, especially when I think about the future, because I also have a master's degree in future studies. And so when I try to see scenarios for the future of South Africa, I really do not see a possibility of the only future I can see that's sustainable is one that still brings together all these races. And I think this is what makes South Africa stand out from all of us, other African countries. In Nigeria, we also have this multicultural, but not multiracial divides, all right? And so I think this is what makes South Africa really interesting. But anyway, thank you so much for that, and I really appreciate this understanding for me personally, and how I understand Julius Malema, the EFF as a movement, and all of that. But now the breakout now of Jacob Zuma is another one. So I've heard your role in the Mkhonto we Sizwe prior to 1994. Jacob Zuma now there's an interview he made during the inauguration of the new president, John Mahama, in Ghana, and that interview, I actually consumed that interview, and he was also speaking about this notion of freedom from oppressors and freedom from oppressors of Africa. So I'm trying to really understand now the MK, the Mkhonto we Sizwe, as at the time you were a member of the MK, and the MK we see today. How do they differ? And also in terms of how you process what's really going on, the transcendental usage of the MK, the name MK, and today. Are we seeing a possibility of the emergence of the same objectives, or how do you process that whole thing with Jacob Zuma coming to the political front again with the name MK Party?
No, they stole the name. I mean, this is stolen valor. If you look at every member of parliament, take their ID and ask them where did they serve under MK. Doesn't exist. The fact that they wear camouflage and took the MK emblem is a fact of stolen valor. There are people in MK party that were never MK. I've never heard of a person that is 25 or 35 years old that served in MK, because bloody well MK got disbanded in 1994. You can't be an MK soldier. You are a veteran. It's like ZANU-PF that invaded the farms. They had 18-year-old people saying they were war veterans when the war ended in 1979. We can't be that dumb. So a brilliant stroke of genius of a couple of people, including Jacob, to take that name and defend it, because he knows that that name has a huge weight of credibility. So the ANC fought it, they tried to stop it, but no court in this country stood against Jacob Zuma. So MK Party was registered, and they continued. And on that wave of revolution, of bringing back old ideologies of national empowerment, nationalization, the ethos of communism and socialism, spurs the old guard and some of the young guard to be part of a revolutionary and huge growing party in this country. So we can't deny that within 5 years, they've done what the ANC could not do in 30 years. They became the third largest party in the country. De facto, they are the official opposition now, because the DA has become part of the GNU. So the actual official opposition in parliament is MK. And they are wreaking havoc. But they're not dumb. They're not stupid. They appointed a person called Judge Lope as the leader of MK in parliament. Why? Well, although he was kicked out of justice, he's a constitutional specialist. And what is MK's clear first objective at the moment, Kwazemi. It is to change the constitution. So when people say that you can ignore MK and that they are Jay-Z rebel, you are making a mistake. You know, there's a snake in your car. It's called a puff adder. I don't know if you have it in the West African continent.
No, I don't think so.
It's called a puff adder.
Hmm.
Grows to about 1.2 meters. It's a thick snake. And it has the most toxic venom on earth. And what the difference between a black mamba and a puff adder is that when you walk, a puff adder will not move. Not like other snakes, they run away. But a puff adder just lies there. And it waits for you to step on it and then bites you. That's MK. MK seems to be huge and unconditioned and ill-disciplined. No, they're not. They have strategy, they have money, and they have a person who undeniably, in the ANC terms, Jacob Zuma is an icon. And that's the problem we face at the moment. I say problem because economically, Kwazemi, their economic system will collapse this country's total economy. They want to go back to the principles of nationalization and communism. It's dead. That economic system shut when the Berlin Wall went down and the Russian Communist Party became democratic in their own way. It's not going to work here. We are a vibrant economy. We travel the world. You are in the UK at the moment. You're a global traveler. You need pounds. You need dollars. Because when you look at your currency in Nigeria and you cash it in to where you are today, I don't think you got much.
No.
So what do? You have to translate and transfer the economy to a global scale. That's why I said to you, MK and EFF are trying to take us back to nationalization. The state should not be in business. The state should create opportunities for business people. Currently, this government and certain people are in competition with companies in this country. Now, you cannot steal, you cannot loot, you cannot continue to just strip the fiscus bare. I mean, we've run out of money. Now we want to raise VAT. VAT has no consequence on people that earn more than 20,000 rand. VAT kills the poor because bread, and they can say, but certain of these things are indemnified of tax. But you can't live in a society where everything you purchase is going up by 2% to create it at more than 70%. It's because we've run out of money. Now we want to tax the rich. We want to bring out corporate tax. We are running out of options. And one of the worst options a country can do is to take more money from the IMF because we're indebting our children. So we better come up with great ideas. We better come up with a better solution. But the alternative for the GNU is MK and the EFF. And it's not that we're against it. It is that their economic policy does not assist the growth of this country. So from my side, I know we need to run down now because I have to attend another meeting.
Yes.
But I want to say three things in memory. Napoleon Bonaparte said, the bigger the lie, the bigger the truth. So that if you create such a huge lie, the normal person will say, but it can't be a lie. We are being lied to by many people for different agendas, and it's all personal. So the world, I think they lie. Number two, Africa is the new hope. People don't get that. And here's the fact. Because we are still lagging in development, because we are still 20, 30 years behind on infrastructure, is a bonus to us at the moment, because the world wars won't come to this continent. It will happen in other areas, like it is in Ukraine, like it is currently in other countries. We have our own conflicts for our own reasons. So secondly, I think the majority of our African conflict is not Africans fighting. And thirdly, we need to start defining what is the word free. There's a saying that says nothing on earth is free. When we talk about freedom, Kwesi, in our next hopeful follow-up, I would like us to talk about what is universal freedom. Because we speak it so quickly. We want to be free, economic free, racial free. What is real freedom? And that is interesting to dissect. Are we, as a world, now being squashed on freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association? Is the world becoming dramatically draconian again? And to end, a question. There's the right wing, there's the left wing, and there's the moderate. I'm a moderate. I am not a leftist or rightist. What is a moderate? Let's discuss that. Because a moderate has a differentiated opinion about ultra-right or ultra-left. I mean, we just got an ambassador thrown out of America because he called Donald Trump's movement a separatist movement. That's dangerous. But is it true? So we need to explore freedom as the next position. But one thing I know, in conclusion, landing my plane with you, I will always fight for freedom of the individual to exist, to coexist, and to fundamentally live his or her life according to their belief and their freedom.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So much to think about, so much to ponder about. You expanded our minds a little on Kwasemi, and I really hope that the viewers really enjoyed this session. Thanks so much. That was Nel De Beer of the United Independent Movement, South Africa, and we would hopefully be seeing more of him to give us more thoughts and things to think about as we proceed with Understanding South Africa on Kwasemi. Thank you so much, Nel De Beer. See you in the next one.
Thank you. And they say the person doing the interview is more important because he guides the question, and you are an unbelievable interviewer, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Have a nice...
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.